What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula. What the Buddha Taught and the World Today. The first of the 10 duties of the king is liberality, generosity, charity, dana. The ruler should not have craving and attachment to wealth and property, but should give it away for the welfare of the people. Second, a higher moral character, sila. He should never destroy life, cheat, steal, and exploit others, commit adultery, utter falsehood, and take intoxicating drinks. That is, he must at least observe the 5 precepts of the layman. Third, sacrificing everything for the good of the people, parichaga. He must be prepared to give up all personal comfort, name, and fame, even his life, in the interest of the people. Fourth, honesty and integrity, ajava. He must be free from fear or favor in the discharge of his duties. He must be sincere in his intentions and must not deceive the public. Fifth, kindness and gentleness, madhava. He must possess a genial temperament. Sixth, austerity in habits, tapa. He must lead a simple life and should not indulge in a life of luxury. He must have self-control. And it shouldn't be for us to have the people who make their way up in politics live some of the most luxurious lives. Millions of dollars a year in expense accounts shouldn't even be considered acceptable for presidents. Now, the protection detail, they're going to have that wherever they go, right? So, self-control. Seventh, freedom from all hatred, ill will, enmity, akoda. He should bear no grudges against anybody. Again, the government has to be about justice and not let feelings get in the way, or emotions get in the way of doing what they should or shouldn't do. Eighth, nonviolence, avahimsa, which means not only that he should harm nobody, but that he should try to promote peace by avoiding and preventing war and everything which involves violence and destruction of life. Ninth, patience, forbearance, tolerance, understanding. Kante. He must be able to bear hardships, difficulties, and insults without losing his temper. 10th, non-opposition and non-obstruction. Eviroda. That is to say, that he should not oppose the will of the people. He should not obstruct any measures that are conducive to the welfare of the people. In other words, he should rule in harmony with his people. And in a way, this is the Hanged Man card of the tarot, but just like sacrificing, the sense of, well, I'm not going to make the public pay for my luxury. But it's not in the self of a sacrifice for others where you become like the Jesus of your time or something like that. It is interesting to note here that the 5 principles are Panchasila in India's foreign policy are in accordance with the Buddhist principles which Asoka, the great Buddhist emperor of India, applied to the administration of his government in the 3rd century BCE. The expression Panchasila, maybe it's Panchasila, 5 precepts of virtues, is itself a Buddhist term. If country is ruled by men endowed with such qualities, it is needless to say that country must be happy. But this was not a utopia, for there were kings in the past, like Asoka of India, who had established kingdoms based on these ideas. The world today lives in constant fear, suspicion, and tension. Science has produced weapons which are capable of unimaginable destruction. Brandishing these new instruments of death, great powers threaten and challenge one another, boasting shamelessly that one could cause more destruction and misery in the world than the other. They have gone along this path of madness to such a point that now, if they take one more step forward in that direction, the result will be nothing but mutual annihilation, along with the total destruction of humanity. Human beings, in fear of the situation they have themselves created, want to find a way out and seek some kind of solution, but there is none except that held out by the Buddha, his message of nonviolence and peace, of love and compassion, of tolerance and understanding, of truth and wisdom, of respect with regard for all life, of freedom from selfishness, hatred, and violence. Now, this thing where we just, the foreigners, no, absolutely not. That's the problem with patriotism. And you really, really know it's an unjust war if there how many opportunities do you get to use these weapons of mass destruction against armies? They level cities are leveled and stuff like that, and to the point of, poisoning the land for hundreds of thousands of years. Um, and some people want to make their find out these secrets, or maybe that's not their intention, but they would if they succeed. People storming a military base, that is, they would. That would be a problem if they succeeded, because they'd find out about technology, military technology that I'd rather our government doesn't have, and I don't want it spread about the world to fringe groups and other governments. The Buddha says, never by hatred is hatred appeased, but it is appeased by kindness. This is an eternal truth. One should win anger through kindness, wickedness through goodness, selfishness through charity, and falsehood through truthfulness. There can be no peace or happiness for man as long as he desires and thirsts after conquering and subjugating his neighbor. As the Buddha says, the victor breeds hatred, and the defeated lies down in misery. He who renounces both victory and defeat is happy and peaceful. The only conquest that brings peace and happiness is self-conquest. One may conquer millions in battle, but he who conquers himself, only one, is the greatest of conquerors. Now, the greater jihad and akbar, or how's the verb in that verse? The greater struggle is the struggle where you don't obey those. You don't go in the way of those who are doing such and such. It's not the battle. The greater one is, the lifelong battle to do what is best. And that's, of course, the greater strength. You will say that this is all very beautiful, noble and sublime, but impractical. It is practical. Is it practical to hate one another? To kill one another? To live in eternal fear and suspicion like wild animals in the jungle? Is this more practical and comfortable? Was hatred ever appeased by hatred? Was evil ever won over by hatred? But there are examples, at least in individual cases, where hatred is appeased by love and kindness, and evil won over by goodness. You will say that this may be true, practicable in individual cases, but it never works in national and international affairs. People are hypnotized, psychologically puzzled, blinded, and deceived by the political and propaganda usage of such terms as national, international, or state. What is a nation but a vast conglomeration of individuals? A nation or state does not act. It is the individual who acts. Just like corporations don't act, it's the people who run the corporations who act. What the individual thinks and does is what the nation or the state thinks and does. What is applicable to the individual is applicable to the nation or state. If hatred can be appeased by love and kindness on the individual scale, surely it can be realized on the national and international scale too. Even in the case of a single person, to meet hatred with kindness, one must have tremendous courage, boldness, faith, and confidence in moral force. May it not be even more so with regard to international affairs. If by the expression not practical you mean not easy, you are right. Definitely, it is not easy, and yet it should be tried. You may say it is risky trying it. Surely, it cannot be more risky than trying a nuclear war. It is consolation and inspiration to think today that at least there was one great ruler, one known in history, who had courage and confidence and the vision to apply this teaching of nonviolence, peace, and love to the administration of a vast empire in both internal and external affairs. Asoka, the great Buddhist emperor of India, 3rd century BCE, the beloved of the gods, as he was called. Obviously, worship creeps in to pretty much every significant spiritual leader, even if they're not a prophet. At first, followed by the example of his father, Bindusara, and grandfather, Chandragupta, and wished to complete the conquest of the Indian peninsula, he invaded and conquered Kalinga and annexed it. Many hundreds of thousands were killed, wounded, tortured, and taken prisoner in this war. But later, when he became a Buddhist, he was completely changed and transformed by the Buddha's teachings. In one of the famous edicts inscribed on Rock Edict 13, as it is now called, the origin of which one may read even today, Referring to the conquest of Kalinga, the emperor publicly expressed his repentance and said how extremely painful it was for him to think of that carnage. He publicly declared that he would never draw his sword again for any conquest, but he wishes all living beings nonviolent, self-control, practice of serenity and mildness. And this, of course, is considered the chief conquest by the beloved of the gods, Asoka, namely the conquest by piety, Dhamma Vijaya. Not only did he renounce war himself, but express his desire that my sons and grandsons will not think of a new conquest as worth achieving. Let them think of that conquest only, which is the conquest by piety. That is good for this world and the world beyond. Oh, beloved of divinity. That's okay. This is the only example of the history of mankind as a victorious conqueror at the zenith of his power, still possessing the strength to continue his territorial conquest, yet renouncing war and violence, and turning to peace and nonviolence. Here is a lesson for the world today. The ruler of an empire publicly turned his back on war and violence and embraced the message of peace and nonviolence. There is no historical evidence to show that any neighboring king took advantage of Asoka's piety to attack him militarily, or that there was any revolt or rebellion within his empire during his lifetime. On the contrary, there was peace throughout the land, and even countries outside his empire seemed to have accepted his benign leadership. To talk of maintaining peace through the balance of power or through the threat of nuclear deterrence is foolish. The might of armaments can only produce fear and not peace. It is impossible that there can be genuine and lasting peace through fear. Through fear can come only hatred, ill will, hostility, suppressed perhaps for the time being only, but ready to erupt and become violent at any moment. True and genuine peace can prevail only in an atmosphere of metta, amity, free from fear, suspicion, and danger.